So this happened to me and my little brother. We'll name him Dylan for confidentiality purposes. We lived together a few years back. I was a 25-year-old male, and my little brother was 19 years old. We were relaxing together playing some Halo 3 on the Xbox, smoking a bowl and just being brothers hanging out, our usual daily days off from work. It was a Saturday night in the mid-summer of 2009. We lived in a fairly quiet neighborhood. The neighbors were just far enough apart that you really had a lot of privacy, and they never got into your business much. We all knew each other though, as our parents had lived in the house for years, and this was our childhood home. When my parents had retired, they moved off and left the house to us, so we never really had to worry about a roof over our heads. Our house was at the end of the cul-de-sac, with a garage door to the right and our front door up 4 steps. This was just to the left of the window between our garage door. From our kitchen, you could see straight out when the curtains were open. This particular night would grow to haunt me and my brother to this day. After a few fairly hardcore hours of gaming, it was about 3 a.m. My brother would need to get up and stretch his legs and relax his hands after so much tiring gaming. He went downstairs to grab some water and a snack. Suddenly, Dylan came running up the stairs and locked the door, freaking the hell out. I looked at him very confused. "Bro, what's wrong?" With a pale, ghost-white face, he looked at me. "There's some guy out on the porch with his hands on the window, smiling from ear to ear." Just as he finished telling me that, we heard 5 knocks at the door. We froze in our tracks, backing away slowly. I climbed under my bed and grabbed my machete and bat I kept just in case, if I ever needed to defend myself in this kind of remote area. I watched too many zombie movies at the time. I handed the bat to Dylan, as he was taller than me and had longer arms, so he would be able to make more use of it. We tiptoed back to the bedroom door and unlocked it. We cracked the door open just enough to see out of. Suddenly, the man began to knock over and over and over, in a repeating pattern. He must have done it at least 30 times. Suddenly, he just stopped. I told Dylan to grab my cell phone and dial 911. He did, and the dispatcher said they were sending officers our way immediately. While on the phone though, the man snuck around the back of our house. We could now hear screaming coming from the backyard. The man was there, staring into our bedroom window with that creepy smile, screaming. We stayed just out of the line of sight, peeking from corners. At this point, the man took off into a full sprint and threw his full body into our back door. We hollered into the phone, "Oh shit, he's trying to break in!" At this point, she told the units to step it up, as he was now trying to make entry into our house. We could hear the sirens closing in faster and faster, as the man didn't even bother to listen. He just continued to bash himself into our door. On the 3rd bash, we heard the door finally give way. We stayed as quiet as possible, listening to things in the kitchen being smashed to hell. We could hear the man taunting us downstairs. Come out, wherever you are." I whispered to dispatch that he was downstairs in the kitchen. She told officers he'd now made entry. One unit said they were close by. We readied our bat and machete as we began to hear footsteps creaking up the stairs. All of a sudden, blue lights could be seen illuminating the house. We heard the police call out. "This is the police. Come out with your hands up. Make your presence known immediately." The man booked it down the stairs and tried to tackle an officer, only to get handcuffed after a bit of struggle. We came out when the officers cleared the house and made sure it was safe. It turns out the man was high on meth, just looking to rob a random house to get another quick fix. We're thankful the officer arrived when he did. We thanked him until the very moment he left. Actually, he still comes by from time to check on us, and even plays video games with us sometimes. I still get nightmares of that man's creepy-ass smile. I hope I never see him again. I'll start off by saying that nothing could have prepared me for what I was going to discover the morning after a night out. It started the same as every other night would. Me and my family got ready to head to our local bar for a fundraising event. I had just turned 18 years old, and was looking to have a chill night with friends and family. I knew most of the people there, so I was already feeling really relaxed. While at the bar, I went to pay for my drink when the bartender told me it had already been paid for. When I went to see who had done this, I saw it was my cousin's partner. He was around 12 years older than me at the time, give or take. I gave him a quick wave and we did the normal niceties like, "Hi, how you doing?" It's important to note I had barely spoken more than 2 words to him before, as he was usually quiet or retreated to his room immediately when we would go and visit. After saying thank you, I thought nothing of it. Nothing really seemed off in our little interaction. By the end of the night, I gathered my family together and told them I wanted to head home now. At this point in time, I was still living at home with my mother. She had made plans to stay at my grandmother's that night, so I was just going to go home and sleep. It was around 11:30 p.m. I was outside having a smoke, about to head off to my car. Just as I was about to go, though, I heard someone call out my name. I turned around to find my cousin's partner now walking toward me. He asked if I was heading home for the night, which I thought was weird. I said it was late already, so I was calling it a night for now. Without even skipping a beat, he mentioned the car that I drove and said he would see me around sometime. At this point, I got a bit creeped out, so I said goodnight and walked off to my car. There were plenty of people outside, so I wasn't really concerned at the time. Once I got in the car, though, my phone immediately went off. I saw it was my mother. She was begging and pleading with me to go stay at my grandmother's house for the night, saying she had a really bad feeling about something. Initially, I was really annoyed. I just wanted to go home and go to sleep in my own bed, but she really insisted. I couldn't really understand why. She wasn't giving any concrete reasons, and I was used to being alone at home at night. She just would not let it go, though. I hung up and started to drive home. I couldn't be bothered going to my grandma's when my own house was just down the road. I was really tired and I just wanted to rest. Not even halfway home, my phone went off, so I pulled over to check it. It was my sister, once again asking me to please go stay at my grandma's house just this night. I was starting to get really pissed off. I decided it would just be easier to go over there instead of arguing with the entire rest of my family. When I got to my grandma's house, everyone was fast asleep. Now I was extremely pissed. I went straight to bed and didn't wake up all night. Things were pretty uneventful, but when I woke up in the morning, my family was talking about how they all had this feeling of dread. That's why they didn't want me to go home alone that night. My mother and I left for home at lunch. I felt off as soon as we pulled into the driveway, though. Once I walked up to the door, I could see a police card wedged into it to call them ASAP. I went inside and found my mother's camera on the kitchen table. This was a huge red flag, as it had been hidden away in my bedroom before we'd left for the fundraiser. I went to my room only to find the entire thing had been completely ransacked. Not a single other room in our house had been touched. My blankets had been pulled back, and it looked like someone had been in my bed as well. My knickers drawer was wide open, and some were sprawled across the floor. Another camera of my mother's was also on the table where my TV was, directly opposite my bed. Clothes were strewn everywhere. By this point, I was losing my shit. If I had been home like the plan was all along, I would have made my way through the house, then crawled into bed without even switching my lamp on. I had done this so many times previously, I wouldn't even have seen the state of my room at all in autopilot mode. My mother gave them a call to find out what exactly had happened, and what she told me made the blood drain from my face. The police had been alerted to a break-in at our next-door neighbor's house, when our neighbors found a man wandering inside. The man had claimed he was my friend, and that he'd gone into the wrong house on accident. They chased him out. Our house had a big 8 by 12 meter deck which looked over my neighbors. They called the police again when they spotted that same man having a smoke on our deck. The police arrived to our house at 2 a.m., but since I wasn't home, no one answered the door. They noticed the lights were still on though, so they went inside to investigate. As they made their way through the house, they found a man hiding in my bedroom in the pitch dark. He couldn't give them a single reason why he was there, or why he had been hiding in my room. They arrested him and took him to the station and wanted to know if we knew him. Turns out it was my cousin's partner. He had been hiding in my bedroom for over an hour, waiting for me to get home. He knew my schedule, and he knew I was going to be going straight home that night. My mother's gut feeling saved me from going home alone that night, and my neighbor's vigilance helped to catch that creep. Nowadays, I always listen without question whenever she has a bad feeling. Who knows what could have happened to me that night? All I know is that it would not have been pretty. The guy was only charged with breaking and entering, and spent some time in jail before being released and moving country, I guess. Always trust your mother's gut feeling, people. It sure saved me from having to deal with all that. I could give you 1,000,000 times as a kid and young adult I felt scared or paranoid out playing in the woods. It's a beautiful place, and I spent my entire childhood getting lost in it. Not literally, though. I was always out there by myself or with friends. As kids, we never got too far out there, but you could actually kind of see the progression of us venturing further and further out as we got older and older. You could see our leftover forts and carvings we would leave over time. This particular time, just like the 1,000 other times before, my friend and I had just graduated high school. It was our last summer of freedom, so we decided to spend the entire summer camping and hiking out there. We decided to try and find a new place to set up camp, and walked for what felt like a few miles before we came upon a nice clearing. Now this area was relatively new to both of us. We got the camp set up and the fire going, and my plan was to wait until nightfall, smoke some weed, and play Monopoly together. For the sake of backstory on my friend and I, my buddy is a smaller, real goofy class clown kind of guy. He comes from a family of foresters though, and always had a deep understanding of all the trees and different plants you might come across. He had no fear of going camping out by himself. If I spent 10,000 hours in those woods, he must have spent at least 5 times that. As for me, I was a taller, sturdier guy. As we got older, I spent a lot more time worried about women and sports, and the woods became a place strictly for small parties. I also never really had the balls to camp out alone. In fact, as I got older, I wouldn't go out very far at all when I was alone. I would always never shake the feeling of just being watched. It might have been just paranoia, but it was still a very uneasy feeling. Anyway, camp is set, the fire is going, but it's getting lower and needs more wood. The sun is down now. We're both cutting it up and having a grand old time. My friend is sitting on this little chair he always brought with him and loading up his makeshift bong. I was crouched breaking some excess limbs off some of the logs we had gathered for the fire. All of a sudden, this real strong breeze cut right through the clearing. I couldn't tell you if it was the suddenness of it or what, but my friend and I both stopped immediately and looked over at each other. The breeze went just long enough to flicker our fire down to a small flame. We sat completely still in almost total darkness, neither of us saying a word. Across from us on the other side of the fire, we could now hear footsteps. They sounded like somebody running, and then they would slow to a walk, then start running once more. It must have been a person because it was definitely 2 legs. By the sound of it, they were pacing back and forth, running and then walking over the same spot over and over. Then, just like it had started, it stopped with a soft crunch onto the underbrush. I knew by that sound, whoever was there had just taken a crouch. I was crouched still as well. I knew I was staring right at whatever was there in the dark. I just couldn't make them out. My friend grabbed my shoulder. He said, "Buddy," and when he did, I felt this surge of fear come over me. I could feel it and hear it in him. I had been so fixed on the footsteps and rationalizing what I'd heard that I hadn't even considered being afraid. But now that it hit me, this was true fear. It was raw and made me feel helpless. I could hear my friend after a while grab some leaves and drop them into the fire. For the split second they covered it before burning, we were in pure darkness. Then the fire sprang to life once more. We both quickly grabbed more brush and threw it in to get the light going. We grabbed some sticks and logs, and neither of us took our eyes off that spot or moved much for over an hour. Finally, the leaves crunched once more as the figure stood up and slowly walked away. Whoever it was had sat crouched and watching us without moving for far longer than any animal ever would. It wasn't until after the footsteps disappeared that I realized a distinct smell had just disappeared as well. It had smelled like a paper mill almost, like spoiled eggs. For the rest of the night, besides whispered remarks, neither of us really moved or stopped looking at that spot. Nobody went into the tent, and I had a very short, light sleep, sitting there on the ground with my head rested on my hands. My friend actually never got to sleep. In the morning, we packed up right away and silently walked home together. To this day, we still talk about those events. In the 7 or 8 years since it happened, my forester friend has not camped out by himself out there ever since. So I used to work on the North Slope of Alaska in the oil industry. The work we were doing required us to travel far out into the Alaska Petroleum Reserve, which is basically just untamed tundra wilderness for hundreds of miles. The oil companies would build these long ice roads in the winter that would lead to exploration drilling pads. Our job was to go out after they finished the initial drilling and test rock formations for their oil-producing qualities. It was mid-January, and the sun hadn't quite come up yet. When I say the sun hadn't come up, I mean in almost a month and a half. Polar nights are quite intense. The particular well site we were traveling to was about 60 miles west of Alpine, Alaska, very deep into the wilderness. Our job took a week in the end, but we finished and were headed back to camp to finish our hitch and go home. At the beginning and end of the ice roads were these guard shacks that you have to check in and out of for safety. There's no cell reception out there, and radios can only work up to a certain distance. If you don't check in or out at a set time, they send someone to look for you to ensure you're not a popsicle. It was about 4 in the morning. Not that it particularly mattered in this land of endless night. We were halfway across the ice road. Travel was slow, as the speed limit on these roads was about 25 miles per hour. All of a sudden, something appeared on the road in front of our headlights. We saw it was a man in jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie jacket walking down an ice road in the wilderness tundra at 4 a.m. It was about -20 degrees outside. Now, it was not unusual for local Inuit people to be out this far hunting. Maybe his snowmobile had broken down and he was trying to get back to the guard shack for help. It seemed plausible enough to us. He didn't acknowledge us as our trucks rolled up next to him. Instead, he just kept shuffling forward like a zombie. He didn't seem cold. His clothing, while not appropriate for this extreme weather, also appeared to be warm and dry. We also noticed he was not Inuit, but was instead Caucasian. I rolled down my window slightly and asked the man if he needed any help and if he was okay. He still didn't acknowledge us though. He just kept shuffling forward, his face completely blank and devoid of any thought or emotion. The other guys in the truck with me suggested this man might have been in an accident and now be in shock. I continued rolling my truck alongside him as he trudged down the road. I was still trying to get his attention. Even in this extreme cold though, I would get whiffs of a peculiar smell wafting off of him. He smelled almost acidic, if that makes sense. There was just a lot off about this guy that made the hair on my neck stand right up. The guy behind me in the truck's crew cab had apparently had enough of all of this though. He rolled down his window and reached out to grab the guy. He later said he was just going to try and shake him out of this bizarre stupor. Before my buddy's hand could reach him though, this walking popsicle spun around and latched onto my buddy's outstretched arm. He glared at my buddy and then me with this look of pure rage, not removing his hand. If emotions had a physical temperature, the look from that guy could have melted the entire tundra in a single minute. My buddy groaned in pain as he tried to get his arm free from this Mr. Popsicle. At that very moment that he tugged, this guy started screaming in our faces. There was so much hate and rage and anger in that scream. It was absolutely terrifying. I slammed on the gas and spun out on the ice for a second before the wheels caught and launched us forward. The popsicle dude had grabbed even tighter of a hold on my buddy's arm and was now trying to drag him out of the truck window. He was running alongside, while the other guys in the cab held on to my buddy for dear life to keep him inside. After several moments, which could have only been a few seconds at most, my buddy's arm tore free from this guy's grasp, and we hauled ass to the guard shack, another 30 miles down the road. We checked in with the guards and reported what we had just seen. The guard looked at us like we were pulling a prank or something, but policy said they had to check it out regardless. My buddy's arm was extremely sore. When he pulled back his sleeve, there were noticeable bruises in the shape of a human hand around his arm. We filed a report with the guard and were told to head back to our camp. None of us really wanted to talk about what had happened, and it was a very quiet drive the rest of the way there. We flew home the very next day. The next time we saw that guard at this shack, we asked him if they ever actually found Mr. Popsicle out on patrols. He told us they had searched up and down that ice road for a solid 12-hour shift and saw nothing, not even tracks in the snow leading off the road. He told us it was a good prank and that he'd get us back for making him waste a shift just driving around. But it wasn't a prank. Who would just make up a story like that? Who would willingly bruise their arm so badly for just a dumb prank? We never got a satisfying answer as to what happened that evening. I still wonder about that dude and what happened to him, why he was acting like that. The Alaskan tundra is a weird place, and that was just one of my many weird stories from my time up there. I'll work to write down some more experiences later, if you guys are interested. I was a teenager in the 90s, and on this particular night I had found myself stuck downtown. It was around midnight when I suddenly found a semi-well-lit bus stop. I looked at the bus schedule there and realized I may have just missed the last bus of the night, unless it somehow happened to be late. I decided to sit down and wait on the bench for a moment just to check. Moments later, this tall man walked right up and sat down next to me. There was plenty of space to sit elsewhere for him, but he huddled in nice and close. He was wearing all black, including a black leather jacket as well. He started to make conversation with me. When I finally looked over to him, he was very tan and had shiny, wavy black hair. I don't even understand how this is possible, but he had like orange eyes, this bright hazel orange with these snake-like slits in them. This contrasted with his dark features and clothes. He almost looked like the devil in person. Maybe he was wearing specialized contacts or something. He took off his leather jacket and laid it across my lap to keep me warm. I took it off immediately and handed it back to him. No thanks. He kept trying to drape it over me. I looked around for other people and only saw a passed-out homeless person sleeping on a bench nearby. The man now started trying to coerce me into getting a ride with him. It was so late and he was worried about me after all. My bus was not coming, and I would not be safe there. I said no thanks. My bus would be here any minute. In my mind, I was panicking because I didn't know if the bus would even be coming at all. The streets were dead and dark. I was scared to leave the only spot that had light in it. After what felt like an eternity though, and almost a sheer miracle, the bus pulled up right next to us. It was the most beautiful bus I had ever seen in my life. I quickly got up and told the man that this was my bus. He looked over at the bus in disbelief and muttered under his breath, "Huh, you got lucky, huh?" I got into the bus and saw out the window him walking to his car in a dark parking lot across the street from where the stop was. He stood next to his car, waving for me to come to him, as if that would change my mind now that I was already on the bus. It did not, of course. I was a wild teen that partied a lot and would stay downtown all hours of the night. I thought I was invincible, but after this incident, I never stayed out that late ever again, especially alone. I know I really did get lucky that night that the bus just happened to show up late, and I had no intention of pushing such luck ever again. I was 14 years old and embracing rebellion against my parents, administrators, and anyone else who tried to stand in my way. A year earlier, I had been arrested at school for possession of marijuana, and I was forced to attend court-ordered NA, along with other rehab counseling. My mother had dropped me off in a sketchy area of town for my weekly meeting that lasted from 8 to 10 p.m. It was summertime, so the sun had already set before I got out. The NA meeting was hosted in a halfway house on a block that had been pretty much occupied by nothing but other halfway houses. My mother was unaware of this at the time. The guys in my NA group were amazing. They had been through hell and came out on the other side intact. They listened to me, understood me, and gave me advice I would cherish for years to come. Eventually, they even protected me from grave danger. The house my NA meeting was located in happened to be on a one-way street with no street parking. There was, however, a gas station around the corner that had very ample space. My mom told me to walk about 2.5 blocks to the gas station after the meeting for her to pick me up. After my group on this particular night, I made my way up the street, heading for the gas station, which was directly behind the houses I was passing. I got to the last house on the block, right before I planned to turn left to go 1 block west to my pickup, and that's when I saw them. There was a group of men on a porch, maybe 5 or 6, and one with a mirror on his lap. They immediately called out to me, asking my name, what I was doing, etc. I ignored them and picked up my pace, but before I could get past them, they were now walking straight towards me. One of them stopped to ask for the time, and I immediately knew I had to run. I started sprinting back down the street from where I'd come, and they started chasing after me. I knew in that moment I couldn't outrun them, so I dipped into a driveway and dove under a parked truck. I hid there, knowing very well my life was now on the line. The men followed me within inches of where I hid, spreading out and searching for me. I could hear one of them calling out, "Where the fuck did she go? Find her!" I trembled, lying on my belly underneath that truck, waiting for someone to drag me out by my ankles. They searched through the yard methodically, and I could hear them pushing through the bushes to find me. After several minutes, which felt like eternity, they decided I must have gotten away further. They returned to their halfway house. I slid out from under the truck and climbed a fence that separated the property I was on from the house my meeting was in. I ran back inside where everyone was still gathered and told them about what had just happened. I wish I could remember all their names, but I'll never forget the way they comforted me and the protective nature they displayed. As soon as I told them what happened, several of them stood up and took action. I don't know what they did, but I know I was chaperoned by the few guys that stayed behind, back to the gas station where my mother was anxiously waiting. We told her the entire scenario, and she took me to the police station to make a report. We never heard if any legal action was taken, but I have no doubt my NA boys unleashed a furious vengeance on those motherfuckers. I wish I could have spent more time with them in the end. Also, I guess I should have elaborated this a bit more, but the reason I mentioned one man had a mirror on his lap was because they were all snorting cocaine, so they were clearly coked out of their minds.